Inside ADX Florence, America's most dangerous prison, one spark can turn a cell block into a battlefield. Tonight, a fire breaks out, alarms scream, and men who have killed without remorse are forced to fight for their lives. Who survives when chaos meets the most dangerous inmates in the country? Welcome to Unspoken Story of Prisoner Prison Documentary Channel, the place where we uncover the untold stories from behind bars. From notorious gangs to shocking prison escapes, we bring you the raw, real, and sometimes chilling truth that most people never see. If you want to stay on the edge of your seat and witness stories you won't hear anywhere else, hit that subscribe button now and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a video. And don't just watch, like, share, and join the conversation. I want to know where you're watching from and what time it is in your city right now. Drop it in the comments below. Let's connect with fellow viewers from all over the world who are as fascinated by prison stories as you are. This is your front row seat to the hidden world of prisons. Subscribe, comment, and let's dive into the truth together. The cell door slammed shut with a sound that echoed down the steel corridors of ADX Florence. Smoke lingered in the air from the small fire one of the inmates had set earlier. Inside, the lights flickered, revealing Jason, Inc., Marshall sitting on the edge of his cot, his arms covered in tattoos, snakes twisting around skulls, words carved in Old English that told the story of his life. He didn't flinch as the alarms blared. Around him, other inmates stared, tense, their eyes like predators sizing up prey. In less than 2 minutes, the situation could spiral out of control. Guards were moving in, heavily armed, voices shouting orders. Jason knew every second mattered. One wrong move, and someone would die tonight. A single drop of water echoed somewhere in the corridor, loud enough to feel like a gunshot. The tension was unbearable. And yet, inside this prison, America's most dangerous, violence wasn't the exception. It was the rule. It all started with a whisper, a rumor that someone had smuggled a weapon into the unit. In a place like ADX Florence, even whispers could ignite chaos. Jason's mind raced. He thought about the other inmates, the gang leaders, the murderers, the masterminds of crimes too horrific to imagine. They weren't just numbers here. They were stories inked into skin, scars on their bodies, a lifetime of choices etched into their eyes. But tonight, the rules were different. The lockdown, the surveillance, the high walls, and razor-sharp fences could only hold so much. Tonight, something inside the prison had snapped. Jason's pulse was racing. The tension wasn't just from the fire or the alarms. It was the knowledge that, in this place, the next moment could change everything. One fight, one slip, one decision could decide who lived and who didn't. And no one outside would ever hear about it. Days before the fire, Jason had arrived at ADX Florence. He was 32, 6'2", and his tattoos were a roadmap of his past, each one a memory of a crime, a fight, a betrayal. When he first walked through the massive steel gates, he had already served time in federal prisons across the country. But nothing was like this. ADX Florence was built to contain the most dangerous people in America. Every hallway, every cell, every guard was designed to make sure no one ever escaped or survived easily if they caused trouble. On his first day, he met Raymond Hawk Collins, a man whose forearms were covered in jagged symbols and dates of his victims. Hawk had spent decades in the shadows of the U.S. prison system, and he wasn't afraid of anything. Jason watched him closely. In this place, alliances could mean life or death, but trust was a currency no one could afford. The daily routine was grueling. Waking at 5 a.m., the clanging of doors echoing down concrete halls. Meals served in small trays under fluorescent lights, eaten in silence. The air smelled of disinfectant and sweat. Every step was monitored. Cameras recorded everything. Guards watched constantly, but the inmates? They watched each other even more closely. One wrong glance, one accidental bump in the hallway, and a fight could erupt. Jason learned quickly. He knew that in a prison designed to crush the human spirit, survival depended on patience, observation, and understanding the invisible rules. Tattoos became signals, gestures, and warnings. A snake coiled on the wrist wasn't just decoration, it was a message. Weeks passed, the tension simmering quietly, until the night of the fire. No one expected it to happen in Unit B-4, where the quietest, most controlled inmates were kept. But someone had found a way to ignite a small flame. A broken light fixture, some cleaning supplies, and a match. The fire spread slowly at first, just smoke curling along the concrete walls. Then, suddenly, panic. Alarms screamed. Guards ran down the corridors. Jason saw the fear in the eyes of men who had killed, maimed, and orchestrated chaos across the country. Fear wasn't supposed to exist here, but tonight, it did. He knew the rules of survival better than most. Stay calm. Watch. Wait. But when the smoke thickened and shouts became screams, Jason faced a choice. Act, or be consumed by chaos. And that's when it happened, something no one expected. The fire wasn't the only problem. A fight erupted between two of the most feared inmates, their fists pounding through metal doors, echoes bouncing across the concrete. Sparks flew, not just from flames, but from anger, power, and desperation. Jason's heart pounded as he realized that in that instant, everything he had learned, every careful step he had taken, would be tested. Who would survive the night? Who would fall? And what dark secrets would be revealed when the smoke cleared? No one knew. Not yet. Jason Inc. Marshall stepped through the massive steel gates of ADX Florence under a cloud of cold morning air. The wind cut through his jacket like a knife, carrying with it the scent of concrete, disinfectant, and something darker, fear. This wasn't like the federal prisons he had known before. ADX Florence was built to break men, to strip away every comfort, every illusion of freedom. He looked down at his arms. His tattoos, the snakes and skulls and dates etched into his skin, told his story louder than words ever could. They were warnings, memories, and confessions all at once. Every man here had a story like that. Every man here was dangerous. As he walked toward his assigned unit, he saw them, men sitting silently in their cells, staring into nothing or tracing patterns on the walls. Some of them had faces covered in scars. Some had eyes that seemed to burn through you. Jason knew instinctively, these weren't just criminals. These were the people the world had forgotten, and ADX Florence was where society sent the ones it feared most. The guards led him through the maze of corridors, the clanging of metal doors echoing like gunshots. He noticed the cameras in every corner, the sensors on the walls, the tiny slots in the doors that allowed for controlled observation. Every step reminded him that freedom was a memory here, a fragile concept that could be taken away in an instant. In his first days, Jason kept his head down. He learned quickly which inmates were troublemakers, who ran the Cellblocks, and which alliances were worth forming. He met Raymond Hawk Collins during a brief exchange in the recreation yard. Hawk's forearms were a map of his crimes, jagged tattoos, dates of victims, and symbols that warned others not to cross him. Hawk didn't smile. He didn't need to. In a place like this, respect was earned through observation, patience, and the quiet demonstration of control. Meals were served in silence, trays sliding across stainless steel tables under the watchful eyes of guards. The food was cold, bland, and barely enough to keep men alive, but it wasn't meant to comfort. ADX Florence was designed to strip men down, to make them feel the weight of their isolation. Some inmates spent 23 hours a day alone in a cell no bigger than a small bedroom. 1 hour out was controlled, observed, and dangerous. Every glance, every movement, every word could start a conflict. Jason noticed the unspoken rules immediately. Tattoos weren't just art, they were language. A serpent on a forearm could mean a warning. A number etched into the shoulder could mean loyalty to a gang or a warning of past crimes. A smile at the wrong time, a misstep in the hallway, and trouble could erupt. Days turned into weeks. The monotony was crushing, but Jason stayed alert. He listened to the whispers of other inmates, small hints about secret deals, fights waiting to happen, and tensions that could explode. He realized quickly that in ADX Florence, survival didn't come from brute strength alone. It came from understanding the landscape of fear, control, and observation. One night, as he lay on his cot tracing the lines of a snake tattoo on his arm, Jason heard something unusual, a soft scratching sound behind the steel door. Nothing in ADX Florence was ever just normal. His pulse quickened. He sat up, listening. The scratching continued, faint but deliberate. Jason moved closer to the door. Shadows flickered under the dim light. A whisper carried through the cell block. Something was being moved, something hidden. This was the first hint of the fire that would come. A spark waiting to ignite. And Jason knew it. He felt it in the tension in the air, the way the other inmates watched him, the way Hawk had narrowed his eyes during recreation earlier that day. Something was about to happen. Something that would test everything Jason had learned in his life as a criminal. Everything he thought he knew about fear, control, and survival. ADX Florence wasn't a prison. It was a pressure cooker, and tonight, the pressure was about to explode. Jason's heartbeat echoed in the silence. A choice loomed ahead: stay in the shadows, or step into the chaos and see who survived. And the chaos was coming faster than anyone could imagine. Jason had been in ADX Florence for a few weeks now, and the tension was suffocating. The prison had a rhythm, a cold, mechanical beat, but tonight, it was different. There was an edge in the air, a feeling that something was about to break. He was sitting on his cot, tracing the lines of his tattoos, when he heard it again, the faint scraping sound behind the steel door. This time, it was accompanied by a low whisper. Jason's eyes narrowed. He knew the other inmates could hear it too. A ripple of unease moved across the cell block like a wave. Raymond Hawk Collins was pacing near the small window of his cell, his eyes sharp, scanning the shadows. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Everyone here understood the unspoken rules. You survive by watching, by waiting, by being ready for what no one else can see coming. Then came the first sign of chaos. A shout, a guttural, desperate sound, erupted from the far end of the corridor. Jason could hear the clanging of metal, the harsh voices of guards barking orders, and the unmistakable roar of panic from the inmates. A fire had started in Unit B4. Smoke began to fill the corridors, twisting like serpents under the harsh fluorescent lights. The smell of burning plastic and concrete made Jason's stomach churn. Men were shouting, some laughing, some screaming. Chaos had arrived. Jason stayed calm, observing. He knew that in moments like this, panic was the real enemy. The fight wasn't just about strength. It was about control, about staying one step ahead. He watched as two of the most feared inmates clashed. Fists pounded against steel, shouting filled the air, and the echoes seemed to rattle the walls themselves. Sparks flew, not just from the fire, but from the raw anger and desperation in the room. Hawk moved silently, slipping past the chaos, his forearms tensed, tattoos like warnings in the flickering light. Jason followed his lead, knowing instinctively that some men thrived in this environment, feeding on the fear of others, while some would crumble. Inside one of the cells near the fire, a younger inmate, barely 25, cowered on his cot. His body was covered in fresh tattoos, mostly gang symbols. He had never faced real chaos like this. Jason could see the terror in his eyes, the way he clutched the bars. One wrong move and the fire or the fight could reach him. Jason realized that ADX Florence wasn't just a prison. It was a mirror of every violent, desperate choice a man had ever made. It was a place where every sin, every crime, every betrayal was amplified. And tonight, it was all coming to the surface. The guards were shouting, their voices cutting through the smoke, but they couldn't control everything. There were too many men, too many hidden angles, and too much anger ready to explode. One guard yelled for Jason to stay back, but instinct told him this was the moment to act. Not to fight, but to survive, and to understand what made this prison the most dangerous in America. He moved carefully, his eyes tracking the flicker of flames, the movement of shadows, the subtle tension in every man's body. One step, one decision, could mean life or death. The fire was spreading faster now, smoke curling into the cells, suffocating the air. Then it happened. A loud crash. A metal door had been ripped from its hinges. Men screamed as the fire licked the walls, and Jason realized the chaos wasn't just external, it was inside the minds of the inmates. Fear, anger, and desperation collided, creating a storm that no steel or concrete could contain. Jason felt the heat on his skin, smelled the smoke, heard the panic all around him. And in that moment, he understood the harsh truth of ADX Florence. Survival wasn't about fighting the system. It was about fighting the men and monsters trapped within it. He glanced at Hawk. The older man's eyes were focused, calculating, unflinching. Tonight would reveal who was truly in control. Tonight would show who could survive the fire, the fight, and the darkness that this prison had been designed to hold. Jason took a deep breath. The next move would decide everything. And then, a shadow moved behind him. Not a guard. Not a fellow inmate. Something, or someone, unexpected. Jason froze. The night in ADX Florence was far from over. Jason's eyes scanned the smoke-filled corridor. The fire's orange glow painted the walls in flickering shadows, making every inmate look like a predator waiting to strike. The metal doors rattled from the chaos around him. He could hear the screams, the shouts, the distant clang of another door being forced open. Hawk moved silently, like a shadow himself, slipping past men whose tempers were short and whose patience had vanished. Jason followed closely, knowing that sticking too close to anyone could either save his life or get him killed. Every step was calculated. Every glance was a measurement of threat. In the chaos, alliances formed as quickly as they shattered. A man with a serpent tattooed down his neck, known as Viper, tried to pull a younger inmate into his corner, promising protection. But protection in ADX Florence was never free. Viper demanded loyalty, and loyalty here meant violence if you refused. Jason watched, waiting. He didn't need anyone to fight his battles, but he needed to understand who would survive the night. The fire was spreading faster now, smoke thickening with each passing second. Jason could hear the alarms wailing, but they had become a background noise, a constant reminder that the rules outside didn't matter here. The only rules that mattered were inside your cell, inside your mind, and inside the walls of this prison. Then came the first betrayal. A man known as Hammer, a giant with tattoos of axes down both arms, lunged at Viper. The fight was brutal and loud, metal clanging against metal, shouts cutting through the smoke. Jason felt the shift in the energy. What had started as chaos was now survival of the fittest. Alliances didn't matter anymore. Trust didn't matter. Only power did. Jason moved closer, ducking behind a half-open steel door. He could see Hawk dispatching another inmate, not with brute force, but with precision. Every move Hawk made was calculated. Every gesture sent a message. In this place, fear could be a weapon. The fire alarms continued to blare, but now the heat became unbearable. Flames licked the walls, smoke curling in thick black waves. Jason could see men coughing, stumbling, panicking, and some were laughing, madness creeping in as the night grew darker. A shadow moved near Jason. He turned sharply and froze. It was the young inmate he had noticed earlier, the one barely 25, with gang symbols tattooed across his forearms. His eyes were wide with fear, but there was something else too, calculation. He had survived this far by watching, by waiting, by understanding that in ADX Florence, anyone could turn into a threat at any moment. Jason and the young inmate exchanged a glance, silent acknowledgement passing between them. Survival sometimes meant temporary alliances, even with strangers. They moved together down the corridor, stepping over debris, avoiding the worst of the flames, careful not to draw attention. Then came another sound, something louder, more deliberate than the fire or the shouts. Metal doors slamming violently, echoes bouncing down the corridor. Jason's heart raced. Someone was breaking into the inner cells. Someone dangerous. The temperature rose. The smoke burned Jason's lungs. Men were screaming, running blindly through the halls. And yet some remained unervingly calm, calculating their next strike. Every tattoo, every scar, every glance carried meaning. You could read the intentions of a man by the way his hands moved, the way his eyes flickered. And tonight, every intention spelled death. Jason knew the moment of truth was coming. The chaos had revealed the raw nature of every inmate in ADX Florence. Their fear, their ambition, their willingness to do anything to survive. And as the fire spread, as the smoke thickened, and as the shouts grew louder, Jason realized that this night would leave scars deeper than any tattoo. Then he saw him, a figure moving against the firelight. Not a shadow, not just another inmate. Someone who should not have been there, yet was. Eyes locked on Jason and Hawk. For a split second, everything froze. Time seemed to slow. Jason's chest tightened. This was no ordinary confrontation. This was something bigger. Someone had come into the storm with a plan, and that plan had a target. Jason knew the next few minutes would define who lived, who died, and who left ADX Florence with their mind intact. The fire roared. The smoke twisted, and the figure stepped closer. Jason's heart pounded as the figure stepped closer, emerging from the smoke like a predator in the shadows. It was Marcus Crow Delaney, A man whose body was a roadmap of every crime imaginable, inked in dark, jagged tattoos. Crow's eyes were cold, unflinching, the kind of gaze that made men freeze in their tracks. Tonight, Crow wasn't just another inmate. He was the storm incarnate. The fire was now roaring, flames licking the walls, smoke filling every corner. Screams echoed through the corridors. Jason and Hawk crouched behind a twisted metal barricade, sweat and ash clinging to their skin. Every instinct screamed at them to move, to fight, to survive. Crow moved like a shadow, silent but deadly. Men scattered as he passed, some throwing desperate attacks, others retreating, coughing from the smoke. The young inmate Jason had briefly allied with earlier was nowhere to be seen. Survival here was ruthless, and alliances were fleeting. Jason knew he had only one chance. He leapt from cover, aiming to intercept Crow before he reached the inner cells. The two collided, a brutal clash of strength and skill. Metal rattled under their combined force. Hawk moved beside him, striking with precision, taking advantage of every opening. The chaos around them blurred into a nightmare of fire, smoke, and screaming men. A sudden explosion, a fire suppression system activating, soaked the corridor with cold water. The flames hissed, black smoke curling into steam. Jason gasped for air, coughing, but it gave him a brief advantage. Crow slipped, and Jason seized the moment, grappling with him until Hawk joined in, holding him down. For a fleeting second, control was within reach. But ADX Florence didn't forgive weakness. Other inmates rushed forward, emboldened by the chaos, forcing Jason, Hawk, and Crow to move again, deeper into the corridor. The fire was no longer just a threat. It was a weapon, hurting them, pushing them toward one another. Hours, or maybe minutes, passed like an eternity. The smoke thickened, the fire roared, and Jason realized that survival wasn't just about strength. It was about cunning, patience, and understanding human nature under pressure. Every man here was a mirror of the choices that had brought him to this place. And tonight, those choices were written in blood, sweat, and flame. Finally, as the fire began to die down, the smoke clearing into streaks of orange and gray, Jason and Hawk stood among the ruined cells. Crow was subdued, though alive, his tattoos smeared with soot and sweat. The young inmate had survived too, crawling from the shadows, eyes wide but unbroken. Silence fell over Unit B4. The fire had claimed its territory, leaving destruction in its wake, but life had endured. Jason looked around at the men, at the scorched walls, at the chaos that had consumed everything. ADX Florence had shown its true face, a prison where fear, violence, and survival collided in a way the world outside could never understand. Jason traced the lines of his tattoos one last time, feeling the weight of everything that had happened tonight. Every scar, every mark, every lesson learned in this place had brought him here, and yet, he knew the story wasn't over. ADX Florence wasn't just a prison. It was a test, a crucible, and for every man who survived, it left something behind that would never be erased. The fire was extinguished, the alarms were silenced, and outside the steel gates, the world remained oblivious to the chaos that had erupted within America's most dangerous prison. ADX Florence wasn't just a building of concrete and steel. It was a world of its own, a place where men like Jason, Hawk, and Crow faced the limits of human endurance, the shadows of their own pasts, and the brutal truth of survival. For those inside, every day was a test. And for those watching, the story of ADX Florence is a chilling reminder. The most dangerous places are not always where you expect them, and the human spirit can be pushed further than anyone could imagine.